Tonight, from deadly shootings to riots on the streets.
President Trump will not give the violence a pass. He will restore order.
The White House pushing a controversial plan to fight local violence with federal forces.
This is the greatest public health crisis that our nation's faced in more than a century.
And the battle against the pandemic and the race for a vaccine. Plus, how a $740 billion U.S. defense bill could open the door to danger in Israel. Tonight on Faith Nation. The self-proclaimed law and order president appears ready to ramp up federal law enforcement in cities across the country. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Well, Chicago may be the latest city to see a surge of federal agents after an overnight mass shooting in the Windy City. CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us now. Ben, how are Chicago's leading officials reacting to the possible deployment of armed federal troops there?
Well, John, for one, the mayor of Chicago does not want federal agents in her city. In fact, she is calling for a congressional investigation into the matter.
The Trump administration is not going to foolishly deploy unnamed agents to the streets of Chicago.
Continuing violence and death are the reasons the White House might send agents to Chicago. The latest case Tuesday night. 15 people were hurt after an exchange of gunfire outside a funeral home.
We do not welcome dictatorship. We do not welcome authoritarianism.
Such a move happened in Portland after 55 straight nights of protests demanding an end to police brutality, racial injustice in the presence of federal officers. A Justice Department court filing revealed 114 agents on the ground protecting federal facilities in downtown Portland. Acting DHS Secretary Ken Cuccinelli based the decision on intel that protesters are planning violence against a federal courthouse in the city.
This is a long-established federal practice. It's well within the authority of the federal government.
In a letter, mayors from 15 cities, including Portland, are demanding the Trump administration withdraw its forces from their communities. Constitutional attorney John Whitehead calls the White House's action a federal coup to overthrow states and nix the 10th Amendment, adding it could snowball into an act of aggression against the states, a coup by armed, militarized agents of the federal government. This all began in early July when Attorney General William Barr announced Operation Legend, which aimed to deploy unmarked federal forces to crack down on protesters and other threats the president insists are endangering the nation. And today, President Trump gave a bit of an update on Operation Legend in the East Room of the White House. And at this point, he has not made a decision whether agents will, in fact, be deployed to Chicago. John?
All right, CBN's Ben Kennedy. With me now, David Brody, CBN News chief political analyst. David, yesterday you talked about how the violence in some American cities goes to this notion of the fight for the soul of America and the decision voters will have to make between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. How does all of this play into that?
Well, you're right, John. That's exactly what we're seeing here. Look, Donald Trump is all in on law and order. Good luck with that. I mean, you might be a one-term president, FYI. Someone might want to get a memo to the White House on this because I'm not quite sure if the country is ready for full-on law and order. Yes, they want law and order. That's not what I'm saying. But now we've got federal agents going in to certain cities, and Donald Trump believes that if there's going to be damage to federal property, rightly so, federal agents should go in. The question is it escalating the situations? Clearly, some people say yes, others say no. Bottom line is, look, he's all in, and it's a roll of the dice for sure politically.
And David, to the coronavirus, the president helmed the first task force briefing in 3 months solo yesterday. A bit of a surprise there. David, if we apply the same logic the president is using to quash riots in places like Portland or the violence in Chicago, some might ask, why not federalize the response to the pandemic, which affects more Americans, either with a mask mandate or using the Defense Production Act to break the backlog in test results or the lack of PPE?
Yeah, well, I think you can look at it two different ways. I mean, the folks that want a federal response to COVID-19 don't want a federal response when it comes to law and order and looters and criminals throwing Christopher Columbus into Baltimore Harbor. They don't want that, but they do want a federal response when it comes to COVID-19. So it seems a bit hypocritical on that front. Having said that, the other way around is the president's being very tough on law and order, but where is the top-down approach as it relates to COVID-19 and testing and all that? Of course, the White House will push back and say, look, we've sent, 38 million masks, N95 masks, and I can go down the list, but they have a whole long list of how they have gone ahead and done exactly what they believe should be done. But it's interesting. They're taking a states' rights approach on COVID-19, but not so much on the law and order part, because that's what Donald Trump's bread and butter is.
Yeah, setting up a little bit of a 10th Amendment fight there. David, we have less than a minute left. The Biden campaign is out with a trailer teasing a conversation between Joe Biden and former President Barack Obama out tomorrow. They talk about the pandemic, the economy, racial injustice, and Biden's ability to relate with others. How much will Biden rely on Obama during the campaign, and is there a danger in utilizing him too much?
John, you're absolutely right. There is a danger. Let's back up for a moment. This idea that Barack Obama is going to be on the campaign trail with Joe Biden. What campaign trail? There is no campaign trail. Joe Biden's in his basement, or he'll go to a conference room and they'll have a discussion and he'll talk to 9 people and a dog somewhere in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and that's about it. The bottom line is you're not going to see these big rallies with Biden and Obama. So this will be an interesting conversation to listen to. Look, if I'm the Biden campaign, I'm very concerned about how this is going to go tomorrow. You're going to have Barack Obama, tier A Democrat Party, sitting with Joe Biden, 77 plus, not necessarily on top of his game. I'm not sure if that's a great visual for this campaign.
All right, David. We are out of time. Thank you so much. CBN's David Brody.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, a noticeable change in tone and operations at the White House amid growing concern over the rising number of COVID cases. More than 74,000 new cases recorded on Tuesday alone. Joining me now, CBN national security correspondent Eric Phillips. Eric, there is a noticeable new weight to the warnings from President Trump.
Well, John, there absolutely is. And as the number of cases here in the U.S. approaches that 4 million mark, then what you're seeing is the president's advisors telling him that if he's not perceived as taking this pandemic seriously, well, it could cost him the election. Meanwhile, D.C.'s mayor is taking actions of her own, mandating that all residents wear masks anytime they're outside of their own homes. Alarming numbers continue to grow, including 1,000 COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. in just the past 24 hours. Virus-related hospitalizations are up in 40 states. All of this leading to a change in tone from the commander-in-chief.
It will probably, unfortunately, get worse before it gets better. Something I don't like saying about things, but that's the way it is.
The president also coming around on the mask issue.
I have no problem with the masks. I view it this way. Anything that potentially can help, and that certainly can potentially help, is a good thing.
Meanwhile, the biggest change is that the surging virus is causing Florida and much of the South to mirror how the Northeast looked back in April. Still, officials say what was the best guidance still is.
Universal wearing of masks, close the bars, stay physically distant, wash your hands. The really fundamental things. It's not rocket science.
During a Homeland Security hearing Wednesday, House lawmakers pressed FEMA Administrator Peter Gaynor on the need to end reliance on China and other countries for personal protective equipment and other material needed to wage this war.
We are on a path to increase U.S. production in the U.S. The recent CARES Act provided $1 billion under Title III to bring some of these resources back to the U.S. So investments in test kits and reagents, N95 masks and PPE, prioritized pharmaceuticals, vaccine delivery systems, and supply development are all initiatives that are underway.
With August just around the corner, pressure is on for school officials to make final decisions on whether students can return to the classroom. The CDC director pushing for the doors to open.
There really are a number of negative public health consequences that have happened to our K through 12s by having these schools closed. And so it's so important now to work together with school districts to figure out how they can take our guidelines and operationalize them in a practical way.
On the vaccine front, in an almost $2 billion deal, companies Pfizer and BioNTech have reached a deal with the federal government to provide 100 million doses of coronavirus vaccine. That's under the Trump administration's Operation Warp Speed effort. The deal goes on to say that the companies will provide 500 million more doses if, in fact, they're found to be effective and safe. John.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Coming up, why some fear a multi-billion-dollar defense bill could bring harm to Israel. We explain when Faith Nation returns.
Having sex before you're married is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
Welcome back. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill today hashed out the final details on a recently passed House defense funding bill that the Senate is set to take up soon. But more than a dozen senators support an amendment they want added to that defense bill, which some say could endanger Israel. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has the details.
Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system is literally a lifesaver against terror attacks by groups like Hamas or Hezbollah. This amendment, introduced by Senate Democrat Chris Van Hollen, could conceivably prevent the deployment of this joint U.S.-Israel defense system to protect areas like the West Bank or Jordan Valley. The amendment states no U.S. funds may support the deployment of United States defense articles, services, or training to territories in the West Bank unilaterally annexed by Israel after July 1st, 2020, or to facilitate the unilateral annexation of such territories.
The Van Hollen Amendment is an example of American legislators who cut off their nose to spite their own face, namely the face of America's own interest.
Israel's former congressional liaison, Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, argues this move could have a negative impact beyond the West Bank, while also undermining Israel and the U.S.
Such a proposal reflects a total disconnect by those senators from Middle East reality. When Israel and Jordan concluded a peace treaty in October of 1994, the top Jordanian military commanders, they told the Israeli colleagues a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River would doom the pro-American Hashemite regime east of the Jordan River.
Others argue the amendment contradicts President Obama's 2016 Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. and Israel. That allowed Israel to defend itself by itself. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had hoped to announce annexation of 30% of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, on July 1st. But a combination of White House indecision and a rebound of COVID-19 has delayed that decision. Annexation is a proposal opposed by senators like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
Those American senators would do well for their own American interests. Israel in the West Bank has become a very potent element of deterrence in face of Iran's ayatollahs.
Attinger doesn't view the Van Hollen Amendment as an anomaly. On the contrary, he sees it as more evidence of an ideological shift in America.
Certainly, that transformation of the American society has also afflicted Capitol Hill as well, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The secret, so to speak, of the very unique bond between the U.S. and Israel has rested on the Judeo-Christian roots of both the U.S. and Israel. A departure from Judeo-Christian roots, a departure by America from those roots would also mean a departure from very special U.S.-Israel relations, which would not bode well for either the U.S. or Israel.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the home front, Tuesday morning at 10:30.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
For decades, tough-on-crime legislation sent repeat nonviolent offenders to prison with life sentences, many locked up as teens or young adults. CBN's Caitlin Burke recently interviewed one former federal inmate about the law that put him behind bars and the fight that got him out.
Really like hell, like how they describe hell. Nobody can hear you screaming, hear your screams. That's really how it is. I mean, you hear people screaming all night, and that's all I used to think about. We're in hell.
At the age of 28, a judge sentenced Herman Tate to life in prison without parole for a low-level, nonviolent drug offense.
Buried alive. Just imagine it, putting you in a casket and you're alive, but you can stand up and walk around in it. That's what it is. You can't get out.
Tate's sentence fell under the federal three-strikes drug law passed by Congress in the 1980s. It states that if someone is charged with a federal drug crime and already has 2 prior drug offenses, then that's the third strike, and a federal prosecutor can require the judge to impose a mandatory life sentence. Tate's first strike came in 1992 for selling 0.5 grams of crack. His sentence, 6 months probation. He gained his second strike 2 years later. That time, he sold 7.7 grams of cocaine. Sentenced to 5 years in prison, Tate was only required to serve 8 months. Then, in 1998, he struck out, charged with conspiracy to sell cocaine. Tate, however, had never heard of the 3 strikes drug law, and since no drugs were found in his possession, he chose to go to trial. The prosecutor filed what's known as an 851 notice.
That means that even if the judge wanted to take pity on you, even if the judge believed that you could be rehabilitated, even if the judge believed that the sentence was too harsh, that sheet of paper meant that you had to receive a mandatory life sentence without parole.
Life.
Wow.
For nothing.
Tate headed to federal prison, where it took 2 years for the gravity of his sentence to sink in.
I keep seeing people going home, and I'm like, man, and I realize, hey, I'm never going home. And it just hit me all of a sudden. And that's when I realized that I had a life sentence in the federal system.
The 3 strikes federal drug law covers all 50 states. Many states have gone further, expanding 3 strikes laws that impose mandatory life sentences for 3 convictions of certain felonies. In California, for example, the 1994 3 Strikes You're Out law was designed to keep murderers, rapists, and child molesters behind bars. Today, however, more than half sentenced under that law are serving life sentences for nonviolent crimes. Evidence that these 3 strikes laws can result in unintended consequences. My Angel Cody is an attorney and the director of the Decarceration Collective, a team of women fighting to free people sentenced to life in prison for drugs and end the policies that put them there. Many of her clients were teenagers or young adults when convicted with their 3rd strike. The mandatory life sentence that followed, basically erasing the possibility of maturation and growth, stamping them instead as irredeemable.
The most potent example of sort of the human spirit, right, is that we tell someone you're buried alive and you're never going to leave prison. And for the person to still have the audacity and the wherewithal to get up every day and to try to make some meaning of your life, I think is for me, it's deeply inspiring. It's why I do the work. It also is the most salient example of why we ought to go back and look at these different laws.
When Congress passed the Fair Sentencing Act in 2010, it provided the potential for a lower sentence, but did nothing for those already in prison. Then, in 2018, President Trump signed the First Step Act, which finally allowed the opportunity to reconsider prior sentences. In reading the new law, Tate regained a sense of hope for the first time in nearly 22 years.
And I'm like, oh, Lord, because it fit me. I fit the criteria.
Cody and her team officially requested his life sentence be reduced. This past January, Tate learned of his freedom.
I'm just watching the TV, and my case manager come out and called my name, Tate. Took my earbuds out. I'm like, yeah, what's up? She's like, you need to come to my office right now. I'm like, oh. So I go over there, and she turns around with a big smile on her face. I'm like, what's wrong with you? She said, Tate, you going home. I just started crying. I said, don't play. She said, I'm for real. I said, don't lie to me. And that's when I found out.
Still, an estimated 800 inmates could likely die in prison under the 3 strikes drug law. A disproportionate number of them are Black.
There are all these places along the highway towards imprisonment where people get off, right? And then there are on-ramps. And what we've seen is that disproportionately, it's more difficult for African Americans to exit off of that highway, right? And that more of them are on that highway towards mass incarceration and imprisonment. Some of that relates to charging decisions that are made. Some of that relates to the rates of arrest. Some of it relates to community resources that are available.
No legislation reforming the federal 3 strikes drug law includes those sentenced to life for marijuana convictions. But Cody believes change is coming.
I absolutely believe that transformative justice will occur. And the reason why is because I think that people are awake and paying attention.
Cody says now is the time for the American people to ask questions and put pressure on our elected officials. That's because voters can make a major impact at the ballot box and be the catalyst that keeps Cody's clients and many others from being buried alive behind bars. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thanks, Caitlin. Coming up, no lemonade stand? No problem. The lengths one company is willing to go to teach kids what to do when a pandemic hands you a lemon.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government. Ready to become a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer? To start your rewarding career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man, come.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes too, and so much more. Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Well, finally tonight, summer is prime time for lemonade stands. This year, though, the coronavirus has kept many budding entrepreneurs from opening up shop. So Country Time Lemonade is stepping in to help the smallest of small businesses.
Country Time introduces the littlest bailout. Stimulus checks to help kids preserve the values of lemonade stands, honest work, and entrepreneurship.
The company is offering $100 to kids who can't do business because of the pandemic. They'll have to submit an essay explaining how they would spend their stimulus, along with a picture of signs they would have posted at their lemonade stands. The Country Time will pick 1,000 kids to receive a $100 gift card. That's pretty neat. Well, that does it for Faith Nation tonight. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow.